Fáilte go dtí an episód sa Ceis na Tangan. Podcrail faoin Mhéileán agus a star de aine atá fistrup faoi our gadrúh léithí agus a role in our bhéiniúlacht. Welcome to The Language Question, a podcast about the Irish language and its history for anyone curious about our relationship with it and its role in our identity. Maris Gnág, bí cinnte a chlárú ag thelanguagequestion.com/resources chun de acmhainní fálam to Sarah Nashka all agus a bheith ar an eolas faoi gachród atá ar siúl ar an show. As usual, please be sure to sign up at thelanguagequestion.com/resources to be sure to get your complimentary, valuable learning resources and to stay up to date with upcoming episodes, guests, and to receive exclusive content. Peish Gaeilge, Shulling, go muine tú soltas. Anyhow, here goes. I hope you enjoy it. Patricia Nic Eoin is a qualified solicitor and accredited translator. She has worked with TG Carr, the Irish language broadcaster, and the European Commission. She is the author of many books in Irish and is the founder of the All About Irish teaching system for adult learners. Joe Fátharta is a native Irish speaker from the Cárthaigh Gaeilge and a passionate advocate of Irish literature. Joe teaches Irish in Dublin City University and understands firsthand the challenges Irish language learners face due to the lack of a truly immersive Irish learning experience. Together, Patricia and Joe are the founders of Listen Up Irish. A Patricia agus a Joe tá fáilte is fiche romh agus tá tharbheith buíochtaíomh as a bheith linn ar an show.
Go riadh amach Flor, tá sé go hol na bheith an seo.
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful to have you both here, folks. And I suppose I want to just put my hand up and declare a kind of an interest here at the very beginning, in that the reason you're here is because I had the pleasure of being part of the Listen Up Irish challenge last summer, I think it was. We're recording this now in early 2026, and I think it was in during the summer of 2025, you ran the Baudelaire challenge, and that's what kind of, prompted me to organize this conversation, to have a chat about what Listen Up Irish is about. But I suppose before we get to that, and we'll talk about that in detail, but would you mind maybe let's start at the very, very beginning. And I know, Patricia, you and I have spoken before, but for people who may not have any knowledge of either of your backgrounds, would you mind just each of you giving us a little bit of background and telling us a little bit about yourselves?
I'll start, so Finghin. Well, I'm from Kinvara in South Galway, and I, like you said, I trained as a solicitor and I also trained as a translator. And I have a great interest in the Irish language, in languages in general, I would say, but especially in Irish. And I have, for the last number of years, been teaching Irish to adult learners. And just in the last couple of years, really, myself and Joe then set up our own teaching program using a really distinct methodology, which I hope we'll talk about later, called Listen Up Irish. So yeah, I'm just teaching adults all the time, really, Irish to people in Ireland and all over the world. And really enjoying it as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Joe, how about you?
Yeah, you kind of said it already yourself. I grew up in Connemara. We had Irish in the household. We also had English in the household. Kind of nothing out of the ordinary. I kind of did a lot of pottering around in my early 20s, mid-20s. And in the last few years, kind of got into the teaching of Irish. At this stage, I'm kind of teaching at university level, and myself and Patricia also have this online gig that we're doing. And really enjoying it. I'm not sure, maybe 18-year-old Joe really envisaged himself teaching Irish, but I have to say it's been great couple of years teaching, adults and all types of people. It's been great.
I can ask you just on the teaching point, was that something that did you go into teaching, let's say in the traditional kind of route or how did that go?
No, I went, so what did I do? Very roundabout, as I said, lots of pottering. I did engineering actually when I left secondary school. Quickly decided that it wasn't for me. Kind of did some odd jobs, then went back and did an arts course, arts with Irish studies at the time. Those kind of BA Connects aren't there anymore. And then after that, did some other courses and just lots and lots of various jobs.
Okay.
And, then I think I met Patricia, and Patricia really is the one that kind of directed me towards the teaching. Well, was it 4 years ago, 5 years ago now?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
I was going to come to that, Patricia, and that's a perfect kind of entry point there. How did you actually come together and meet and set up Listen Up Irish?
on the basis of a misunderstanding, I would say. So 4 years ago now, I was out in Barcelona, and I was just spending some time out there. I work online, so really I can work from anywhere. A few friends living out there. I went over there. I was staying there for a number of months, and as you do when you're abroad, as many Irish people do, I was on Facebook at some point, and I saw, Irish in Barcelona group, and this person put up something about it was in Irish. I read it, and I thought he was looking to meet other Irish speakers. So I replied quickly, "Yeah, I'm around, and actually I can see where you are. I'm very close by. Let's meet for a coffee or something. You want to speak Irish?" And the misunderstanding, basically, if I had read it correctly, Joe was actually looking for students. He wanted to teach people. Anyways, we had a cup of coffee together, and then we were both like thinking, God, it would be lovely to get an Irish speaking group going here in Barcelona. So we did that. We set up an Irish speaking group in Barcelona, had a few meetups going on there, and it's still going, actually. So that's how we started. And then I suppose I already at that stage had All About Irish up and running, and I was teaching adults, as I said, teaching Irish to adults. And I wanted to introduce more conversational Irish into some of my courses. So I needed a second voice to record the conversations. And Joe was at hand there. So I got Joe involved. And then I realized, it was just lovely to have Joe on the courses. He's got absolutely gorgeous Connemara Irish, and sounds fantastic on the courses. So then come the following autumn, I think I needed an extra teacher, and Joe taught some classes for me. So that was really how we started working together. And then as time passed on a bit more, I was aware of Joe's interest. Well, I should let you talk for yourself, Joe. But anyways, great interest in Irish literature and poetry and so on. And I am also very interested in that aspect of the language. And I think it's like, once you speak the language, once you can understand it, then you can access the poetry, the literature, and it's so special. But for people who don't have the language, they can't access it. So to make it accessible to learners, we came up with this kind of these courses. Myself and Joe learn Irish through literature, learn Irish through poetry. So that, I guess, was the start, really. And then Listen Up Irish grew out of that.
I absolutely love that piece that you mentioned there about the accessibility. Because for me, that is just so sort of fundamental, and I maybe mentioned this on here before, but I mean, I just have this thing that I'm continuing thinking, can you imagine an English kid who couldn't understand Shakespeare firsthand? You know what I mean? And that is the culture and all of the cultural references that feed into the culture. And okay, they're probably not sitting down reading Elizabethan English on a daily basis, but they could they could read a sonnet and understand the words, what they say. But an Irish person is in the situation where they have this kind of cultural heritage that is kind of, they're locked out of because of the accessibility thing. So that's why I think Listen Up Irish is such a cool concept that I want to dig into. But before we get there, I want to just maybe stop back and there's two kind of threads here that I'd like to just touch on here, Patricia, because I remember when we spoke before, and so I was very interested in what you mentioned there, Joe, about going into teaching, because as a native speaker, I was very curious about how the teaching route how you got into that, because you don't necessarily always encounter native speakers as teachers of the language. And Patricia, I remember speaking to you previously, that was something, you've encountered kind of pushback from people on that before, haven't you, as being a teacher who's a non-native speaker? And how does that dynamic kind of work in your experience?
Well, I suppose there is definitely advantages to both being a native speaker and to being a non-native speaking teacher. They both bring slightly different things to the learner, and both are very important, I think. So I suppose that's why I like working, especially with Joe, that I think we can bring both qualities together. The non-native speaker, somebody who has learned the language themselves, obviously understands the difficulties that the learner has and should be able to explain them, perhaps. And of course, you get native speakers, of course, who are excellent, are well able to explain the language. And you get non-native speakers as well who have excellent pronunciation and so on as well. So, you can get both in the one person. But I suppose they are coming at it from slightly different perspectives. There's no doubt about that. But both bring something to the table, I guess, you know.
And Joe, just how did you? Very interesting your experience in that, because I remember listening or reading Erlal Leonard being interviewed in relation to this, and he talking about the fact that, you know, he kind of almost, if you like, Irish is something that he just grew up with, and he never really was aware of, you know, what it was. He never had to learn it, and he said, in fact, at the early days of his musical career, it was he could have perceived it more as a hindrance than an actual advantage for him, the way that his career was developing. And then he has later become obviously very, very deeply kind of invested in it. But how did you feel about that as a native speaker, coming to teaching the language and then try to relate to, let's say people who are coming to it without that sort of intuitive sense of it that you would have?
Yeah. This is something that I have been thinking about recently, because as you said, like, I didn't have to ever sit down and learn about, you know, Buckla Baninchnacha agus Buckla Fidinchnacha or the Tishel Ginejoch. Well, we kind of did have to learn them, but it's at school and it was a separate thing. So it was never this, you know, as I said, I teach in university and I see people that have, you know, gone through the whole education system and, you know, their level of Irish still wouldn't be great. That kind of shocks me a little bit sometimes, to think that somebody has gone through the whole system and still they're not able to string sentences together. And so, yeah, that's an aspect of it that I suppose I haven't really been exposed to. But what you know, all I can kind of speak on is like my own upbringing. And I was, you know, obviously born in the Gaeltacht, but the Gaeltacht itself, you know, I was born in the 90s. The Gaeltacht was, you know, the English was starting to encroach on the Gaeltacht. I mean, it was fairly, it was fairly deep in it at that stage. But so I remember like growing up, and I remember parents, my father, or even parents of other children, going to their houses, and like the big thing was like Gaeilge, like more worship kind Gaeilge. If you're not speaking Irish, you know, they'd let you know, and even correcting. You know, if we used the wrong word, or if we said something the wrong way, they'd be quick to correct you. Which, you know, looking back on it, you know, you might have people say that, you know, it's the wrong way to do it, and it might be the wrong way to do it. You know, correcting people all the time, it's really going to hurt their confidence. And but looking back on it, I am kind of appreciative in a way that at least there was people there that were willing to, you know, say, okay, well, we're in the Gaeltacht, we should be speaking Irish.
But as well, then I suppose the thing about that, and I mean, I totally get where you're coming from this, because the correction piece is such a tricky one. I mean, I have kids now who are all adults practically, and but I still, you know, if there's something that they'll speaking grammatically incorrectly, but you know, and their mother will certainly pull them up on it, and it's a natural part of that dynamic. Whereas us as two adults, if we were to encounter and I was speaking and you were to say, no, Flora, it's like that, it would be weird, even though it's something I as a learner would welcome.
Yeah.
Patricia, how do you must encounter this with all the time in All About Irish?
No, absolutely. There is and really, it's really important with Irish, I think, that a teacher doesn't overcorrect, because you can overcorrect, and it's very easy to do it. You just knock somebody's confidence.
Yeah.
And like, the most important thing really is that people are speaking and they're feeling confident. And of course, you know, there's a way to correct, you know, and that is usually just, you know, a minute or two later, you somehow say the same sentence back at them, but you say it correctly. So you don't even, people necessarily don't even know that they're kind of being corrected. But I suppose in a classroom situation, you do have to correct it a little bit, because, you know, you don't want to, if there's other students in the class, everybody needs to hear it correctly. So there is there's a balance, you know.
Yeah, there's a finesse to it, I think. Like, my parents wouldn't have had, and, you know, my friends' parents wouldn't have had. They would be like, you're saying this wrong, say it this way. But there is, as Patricia said, there's a right way to do it. You have to finesse it in a way that isn't, you know, knocking the learner down. You can have just, I think, repetition. So if they say it the wrong way, you can say it the right way, and then repetition with that.
And you make that little loop in your head. You say, okay,
Exactly.
right, okay, and But I suppose the other beauty of that, though, and it's a wonderful thing to hear, but is the fact of having an older generation giving you that kind of just the correct way to to use the language and so on.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing, and wonderful that you are in turn passing that on. But let me just, I suppose, move into then perhaps as a Listen Up Irish is what we're here to really kind of get into and explore. But this isn't your first iteration of this. I mean, this is let's say a development of a process that you've been. And so, could you maybe go back to start first of all, literature and how that kind of started as a thing for you, and go from there.
Interesting. I suppose. I had already made some Irish online courses for beginner level, intermediate level, and so on. And at a certain point, you know that you just would like your students to be getting some level of immersion, and even getting to the point where there are, like, ultimately, I don't want anyone to be coming to classes or taking courses long term. You want learners to get to the point where they start reading for themselves, they start listening themselves, they're independent learners. So for that, I think, I don't know whose idea it originally was, Joe, but one of us had the idea that it would be really nice to do some pieces of literature and to run them as an online course. So we did that. I'd say it's probably 3 years ago now, but...
It was your idea, Patricia.
Well, that's okay. Thank you.
I might have mentioned something that I was interested in reading and writing and literature in general, and Patricia had the great idea. Let's make some courses.
Okay, we have it on tape. Anyway, so we made the course, and I have to say, it's very enjoyable making these courses as well, because we get to go back, and in fact, I'm just thinking, first one we made had a piece from An Béal Boch, Maple Béal Dove by Portugal Cunara, and piece from Madame Gunnigan. And actually, Joe would do the sound recordings. And I remember it was kind of funny. There's a piece, the óráid in An Béal Boch, and the óráid, the speech. And it's almost like a tongue twister. I wish I had it here in front of me. It's very funny.
It's like a Gaeilge, Gaeilge,
Gaeilge. So it goes on and on like this.
Many
takes, many takes.
Many takes, right? So Joe, poor old Joe was recording that, I'd say. I don't know how many times. Anyways, we uploaded the thing, and luckily enough, I had a quick listen. I was like, everything Joe does is good, so I didn't even bother listening. But this once I said, I'll just listen to that, I'm sure it's good. I listened, and in fact, he had uploaded the wrong take. And this one, let me tell you, was full of few F's, fine. It's like,
it's an Anglo-Saxon vernacular.
Oh my God, there sure was, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got sidetracked there. Yes, literature course. And then that went down very well, and we could see that people enjoyed it, and we enjoyed kind of teaching it. We enjoyed interacting with people who took the course and so on.
I think sorry, I'll just say quickly as well. We mentioned that we met in Barcelona, but I was trying to learn Spanish, and maybe languages isn't my strong suit, but I just found it all very boring. To be totally honest with you, the thing I wanted to do really was read books in Spanish. Like, there were authors that I had read in English, and I was like, geez, it'd be great to be able to read them in Spanish. But I wasn't. It was really inaccessible to me. I wasn't at the level really to be able to read them. And yeah, that was something that kind of stuck with me with these courses as well. It's kind of offering those people that, are learning the language, and there's great resources out there to learn the language. There's endless things really, but this was something that wasn't really available for people to actually engage with the culture. You know what I mean? Like, they're actually engaged in the living culture. There's people actually out there writing books in Irish, and you can read them. But, people are at different levels, obviously, and we're just, providing the resources for you to get to the end of the book yourself. And I think that was something that kind of attracted me to the idea of the courses.
Well, that's just such a huge thing, right there. because I mean, there's so much in that. And I've been doing a bit of study recently myself, and this is something I've been looking at in considerable depth, is this idea that, we have, a modern Irish language literature. There are, modern people writing in the Irish language today. But if you were to depend solely on the English language media in Ireland, you would not know that kind of existed at all. I mean, when you open the Irish Times, you don't see mentions or reviews. No, it's there are certain instances of it, and with Patricia Nic Eoin now as the laureate, I hope we will see much more of that. But that, just the fact that you were exposing the existence of contemporary Irish language literature is phenomenal, and then also, in addition to that, enabling people to access it. I think it's a phenomenal thing. But to get into that now, because we'll be speaking here, and I suppose that people have been listening to us will be saying, okay, that's all great, guys. You've been speaking about this Listen Up Irish thing, but what actually is it? So could you possibly maybe just at this stage, just tell the listeners what, no, so I suppose it's an iteration of a number of different courses that you've developed over the years, but Listen Up Irish as a concept, you've obviously refined it to something, and what precisely is it, and what does it look like, and how does it work?
Okay, so I suppose at this stage, Finghin, we had now on the All About Irish website, which is my general Irish language teaching, learning website, I had a mixture of courses, which some I had done with Joe, which are based on literature and poetry, and then the other ones, which are beginner Irish, intermediate Irish, and so on. And the idea, it was very clear that they're two very different concepts, two different methodologies. So we wanted to put the literature and poetry on its own, stands on its own 2 feet. So we developed Listen Up Irish then to give it its own space, so that somebody who lands there knows exactly what they're getting into. They're going to get an immersive experience in Irish, learning Irish through a piece of literature already existing in Irish. These are not texts that are created for learners. Do you know what I mean? They're written for people just to enjoy the language. For Irish speakers to learn to speak, who speak Irish already. So we're not creating our own texts for the learner. And then I suppose it was last summer we wanted to do our first new course on this new platform, on the Listen Up Irish platform. And we were turning over a few different ideas. Just still really hadn't landed on anything by about, this started in January, and I'd say by May we still hadn't picked what we were going to do. And then Joe emailed me and he said, I've just read Baudelaire, and Joanne, it's brilliant. So I got hold of a copy of Baudelaire and I read it, that way, just really quickly, and I was like, oh God, yeah, this is brilliant. But the other thing I noticed about Baudelaire was the chapters are all very short, and there are 30 chapters. So the one thing about online courses is it can be difficult for people to complete. So just to try and keep people going, to make sure they got the most out of the course, we decided that we'd make this one in the form of a challenge, so that every second day we released a new chapter, and just kept people going the whole summer with us then. We did that through July and August last year, based on the novel Baudelaire, which was fantastic choice by Joe, and actually, of course, it's won Irish Language Book of the Year since then. It's won many prizes, that book. So,
yes, it won at the Irish Book Awards in 2005, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Of which there was no mention in the English language press, I have to say. I was watching for it very carefully,
really,
and didn't see it at all.
So. Yeah, and we are going to do Baudelaire again, by the way, coming up again one more time before this summer.
Well, I look forward to it. But I suppose because I took it on last June, or whenever it was, I can't remember precisely, but it was during the summer. And I was a bit up the walls with something else that I was doing, and I was kind of reluctant. I said, it's just kind of crazy now to take this on. And as you say, you have the 30 chapters, and it's every second day the chapter goes out. But the beauty of it is, like, you have this thing that it's maybe 7 or 8 minutes of the chapter. So, the time that it takes to actually sit down, if you take 20 minutes, you really have a huge amount of time to listen to the various different pieces and absorb the challenge. Then, and it's not a big part out of a day. It's a cup of coffee or some time of your lunch. I mean, it works really, really, really well.
Yeah. yeah, you said you weren't sure if you were ready to take it on. I don't think we were really sure we were ready to take it on either when we started Baudelaire, because we were kind of new to it all, to this idea of a challenge, and there was a lot of work involved. But listen, we're delighted we did it in the end. But like, to go back to the a question about like when somebody buys one of these courses, what are they actually getting? So what we kind of did with Baudelaire and what we did with on Mac Cárthaigh, and what we will be doing with the couple of courses that we have planned for the future, basically we divide the chapters, where the book is divided into chapters, and how it's worked so far is every second day you will receive that chapter. Well, when you purchase the course, actually, you will actually receive the book in the post. First thing you'll get. And then every second day.
For anybody who's not watching on the video, I'm actually just holding up the copy of Baudelaire that I received in the post from Patricia and Joe. And it's quite apart from the else, it is a gorgeous book.
Yeah. And you'll get the calendar then explaining when the chapters will be released. So each second day a chapter will be released. You will get the PDF of the chapter itself. You'll get a translation of the chapter. You'll get a recording of myself reading the chapter, so like an audio book. You'll get summaries, video summaries of me and Patricia, or just one of us explaining what's going on. You'll get videos, vocabularies, where Patricia will explain various phrases, words, things like that. You'll also get quizzes. We've added quizzes to the thing. So in case people are listening and thinking these people are just riding on the backs of authors, and we do provide a lot along with the book. We make it accessible for the learner.
Oh, I mean, I can testify to that, because I remember actually receiving this book in the post last summer, because you sent out the book maybe a couple of weeks before the challenge was due to start. And I said, what I'll do now is, and I've been learning Irish for quite a while and reasonably proficient, and like to try and challenge myself. But I started reading, and immediately I just started to get stuck on things like Gaeilge. And I said, wait a second, what is that? And I went to Changlan.ie, and of course it's not there. And it's a type of it's a small crab, it's like small Galway hooker, isn't it, or something like that? Yeah. But it doesn't show in any of the. You're not going to find that easily in a readily accessible off the shelf dictionary. And so as a learner, then because what I find when I hit something like that, I'm like, I can't move off kind of first base here, And so ye provide that kind of very, very, enables the reader to understand the maybe trickier aspects, and then kind of, if you like, use their own Irish to get involved.
Exactly.
Yeah. And also, especially with Baudelaire, and actually with Mac Cárthaigh as well, like, we are also bringing in the cultural or historical context. Anything like that comes up in the book, we explain it in the Storfocal videos. And especially in Baudelaire, there was so many references. Like I said, I skim read it when I got it first. And like I missed tons of references. And only when we were doing it more carefully over the summer and having to prepare the material. And honestly, I think I had Darchel Scully. He was just absolutely tormented with questions from me. He was very helpful in answering them all. But, there's so much in that book in Baudelaire that, the extra resources certainly help somebody to. But it's just that thing as well. And like Joe was saying about reading in other languages, you couldn't read a bit in French or whatever. It's so nice not to be having to look up every word. That's just work. That's tedious. Whereas in the courses, in the challenges, we'd always have a bilingual PDF, parallel text, English, Irish, side by side, so that you don't have to look up any words. But part of the, I think why the courses work so well, though, as well for learners, that there is so much repetition built into the structure, into the methodology. So you hear a phrase, you read it, you hear it, it comes up again in the Storfocal video. It might come up in the summary video. Whereas, and of course, repetition is just vital when you're learning a language. We need to hear phrases and words in context so many times before they're going to be available to us to use ourselves. So that repetition is kind of built in and through the quizzes and all of that as well.
And I suppose the way in which the reader is obviously is engaging with the story and wanting to, follow how the story unfolds and the language, these are all kind of inherently kind of bound up together.
Yeah, I like to think that they're kind of there unknown to the person, that actually the most important thing about the whole thing is a good story.
Mm.
And we were both very clear on that, myself and Joe, right from the start. The story has to be good. It was great. There was one day, the new chapter goes out around 7 a.m, I think, every second day. And there was one morning, there was a bit of a delay on it, didn't go out till 10 or 11. But we had about 10 emails. Where's today's chapter? And that is just fantastic. That's a sign people are just engaged in the story. So that was great.
Yeah.
I think always the best way to learn is kind of like in honest like what's the word, like unbeknownst to yourself, you're just kind of learning and you're not even aware that you're learning. We had a class last night, and one of the students in the class mentioned comprehensible input. I think it's something that you were kind of touching on there as well, like knowing enough to get you along in the story, but you're still having to navigate these new words as well. And I think that's the kind of sweet spot that we're trying to get with these courses, and we're trying to provide different new courses for different learners at their different stages. But to be able to read the story along and recognize maybe 50, 60, 70% of it, and the rest you don't recognize, I think that's like the sweet spot of learning, where you'll be learning, you're taking in new things, but you're also, gaining that confidence and being like, okay, well, I can do this.
And I suppose, but you have the confidence that you can kind of, if you like, you can let yourself, go into it and say, right, look, I'm not going to understand everything, but I know that I'm going to be able to reference that and if you like, fill in the gaps quite easily afterwards. It's going to be readily available to me. It's a remarkable thing. The other thing that I found remarkable about it, first of all, it's an amazing book. It's a small book, but it's so incredibly kind of, he's crafted so many things into that story so kind of skillfully. It's incredible. But like, I suppose few of us, I mean, my biggest challenge as a learner, I'm based in West Cork here, and a non-Irish speaking part of West Cork. And I have very, very few opportunities to use the language. That's my biggest challenge as a learner, I find, is lack of opportunities to engage with the language in a kind of in a meaningful way on a daily basis. And so the ideal thing would be for me to be able to rock up to Coisharga or Cork Gwina or wherever and start spending some time with native speakers. But there are practicalities that make that difficult. But when you get into the book, you're actually sitting down at the table in the back of the post office with the man and his daughter, and they're having this conversation, and you're in it, and you're in this extremely rich kind of Irish language immersive experience, kind of, as you said, you're kind of almost unbeknownst to yourself.
I think, like, unfortunately in this country, it's, as you said, logistics and everything else, it's difficult to actually fully immerse yourself in the language. It's becoming increasingly kind of harder and harder to do, like, even for people that want to go to the Gaeltacht. Sometimes in the Gaeltacht, if somebody there knows that you're not fully competent or fluent in Irish, they might start speaking English with you or something. So it's becoming increasingly harder to maybe fully immerse. But I think it is essential, really, for any language learning to fully immerse yourself in the language. And we could, maybe if we had some other type of business model, we could say, well, we'll do an hour class every evening, and that might be all right. But again, I really feel like this kind of maybe the emphasis is on learning, but it's also on, reading a book, enjoyment, engaging with the culture. And I think we're providing enough material really for somebody to be able to, I can listen in the car on the way home, then I can get home and I can read it. Then I can watch 2 videos while I'm, having a cup of tea. And it's all in Irish, and it's all, it's giving you that immersion, that level of immersion that it's hard to provide.
Well, I think the other thing about the challenges, what we really wanted to do as well, Flora, was like make sure people finish a book, so that people can get in the habit and realize, yeah, I can read a book in Irish. Like, you bought Baudelaire and you started it. And I mean, loads of us do this all the time. We buy books, we start them, finish them. Getting to finish the thing. And like Joe said, getting that little immersion. It's not like hours and hours, but 20 minutes maybe every day, every second day. So valuable in terms of learning a language compared to maybe just going to a class once a week for an hour or something,
Oh, completely. Because I mean, but the other thing about it is, that struck me engaging with it was that, well, first of all, it's a story, and the things about stories is they have a beginning, middle, and an end, and your curiosity is naturally is pulling you forward as the narrative progresses. They're also, as you mentioned, Patricia, I think, which is critically important, they're real stories. So there isn't some kind of an artificial educational kind of construct that has been put together, which can be, and no harm to anybody who does these, but they can be, a bit kind of dull and not particularly engaging, just because you're trying to go through a particular language exercise rather than a storytelling experience. And thirdly, then you have this, like there's a very, very sophisticated social kind of things going on in the story. There's humor, there's jealousy, there's rivalry, there's all these different things happening, and that's kind of, I feel like, a little bit more sophisticated than the ordinary kind of let's do a grammatic exercise. You know what I mean? It's really interesting.
Yeah. You know what? I just think it was such a good choice for our first Listen Up Irish challenge, because when I think about that book now, and like I feel like it was last summer was like book summer for me, but I think it's like a whirlwind of a book is actually what I would say. And then like by the time we got to the end, most people were going, I made it, and I had that feeling myself with it. But the other thing about Baudelaire as a book, can't imagine that book in English. How would that come across in English? It was so uniquely, I think, being able, I'm sure there will, hopefully for the people that need it, maybe there'll be an English translation of Baudelaire someday. I don't think you could ever carry the same, picture, the vividness of the original Irish text. Yeah, that was our first Baudelaire. That was our first challenge. Yeah.
I consider, I think even just the context of the tradition of the Irish language poetry and forgive me now, it's a while since I've actually kind of read it, but there's the tradition of what do they call the kind of is it the Codal, whatever, in Croom every year they had the
Gaeilge.
The Gaeilge, the Gaeilge, right? And that whole thing that is, most Irish people would be completely ignorant of that kind of phenomenon as a thing, whereas it's a key part of the tradition of Irish language poetry, and then how Irish language poetry is woven into Irish language music and song and everything like that.
Yeah. I think you mentioned it as well at the beginning. Like, is there anybody over in England that wouldn't be able to read Shakespeare? Like, I mean, the majority of them could, but in this country, we have this literary history that we're cut off from it. A lot of people are cut off from it. They're unaware of it. Obviously, maybe if their level of Irish isn't that good, they're not able to read it, and that's the impact of colonialism and all the rest of it. And it's a shame, really, because it gives such a color, it gives such a vividness to this place, this island that we live on, that this our own cultural heritage, and it's such beauty, especially if you go back and look at some of these poems that were written by these poets, and the language, the playfulness with language, it's amazing, really. Like, it's so beautiful and powerful, and it's a real shame that we are kind of cut out, that a lot of people are cut off from that, and they're unaware of it, as you said.
But I think this is, it is, and there's no doubt about that. But I think what you guys are doing here is you're building a bridge right back in there, and that's extraordinarily cool. I mean, because again, O'Scully has done this like stuff. I mean, he's even got this great social stuff, like the way, and again, no spoiler alert here for anybody who hasn't read the book, but I mean, because it revolves around a whole thing about a school teacher kind of situation, and the new school teacher comes in it is coming from a kind of a particular kind of background, which was around the establishment of Maynooth in the 19th century, and there was a certain kind of a social dynamic associated with that versus what was the norm in the Gaelic, and all of these things come across beautifully in the book and are kind of, if you like, there's so many different kind of layers of social commentary going on in there.
Yeah, and he does it very lightly. Like, it kind of shows that how broad his knowledge is. Like, he really a fantastic writer, but I felt like he just did everything so lightly that he just snapped everything in. And, can be aware of it or not, and it doesn't really matter with the story. But lots of layers to the story.
And for anybody who I can assure you, I mean, one of the things that I found phenomenal about reading the book via Listen Up Irish, and I have to confess, I don't think I would have been capable of reading the book on my own. But was you providing this kind of context? I know, Patricia, I remember you have videos about like what that whole kind of historical context of the establishment of Maynooth was and what it looked like and how that all happened in the 19th century leading up to the famine and so on.
Yeah. I mean, it might look like I'm very knowledgeable on all of these things. When actually in the background, I was frantically researching everything, and for the most part, just like emailing Darth and asking him to explain things to me so that I could explain them. But super interesting. And like Joe said, like everything is dropped so lightly into the book that why were they playing cricket in Maynooth?
Yeah.
But, and like the language in the book is so lovely. And I think one other thing we do try to do with the recordings, and I suppose Joe does the sound recordings, and then very often I'm doing more of the explanatory videos, is that for a lot of learners, they may, like you said yourself, they'll turn on Radio Gaeilge and they'll try to listen and get very despondent, and because it's so difficult, not really understanding very much. But I do think a lot of that comes down to not having an ear for any particular dialect, because of course when you listen to Radio Gaeilge, it really pretty much it's native speakers with from Connacht Irish, maybe Ulster Irish, Munster Irish, whatever, different dialects, subdialects. But people often, when we learn Irish in school, there's no focus given to that, so we can hear words and go, oh, it sounds very strange on the ear. Whereas with Listen Up Irish, obviously when Joe reads, it's going to be the Cárthaigh dialect, but when we did explanatory videos, I would always try and point out, why are we saying Gaeilge instead of Gaeilge, Agdana instead of Agdana, and for the Munster speaker of beg, beg me on Moras, beg me, and just to keep pointing those things out so that people are kind of getting used to that, and that hopefully then you're getting closer and closer to turning on Radio Gaeilge and listening to it. Yeah.
Completely, I think completely. Because I certainly, again, I put my hand up here. When I came back to learning the language, when I say come back, I continuously have to stop myself and say I didn't come back. I actually started learning the language as an adult, because I was a complete messer as a young person supposed to be learning it. But I started with the Kaidan. And, decided, look, okay, most of the kind of learning resources that are out there are in the Kaidan. So let's learn the Kaidan, and there's the correct, the way they should be. And of course, for many native speakers, I'm sure you'll say the Kaidan is a kind of a bastardization they've taken these dialects and kind of rammed them together to try and create this official central, which isn't natural to anybody. And then when you go off and you try and experience the different Kainunti, it's like, oh my God, I'm kind of having to learn a whole new language again here. And it can be a little bit daunting, but that is the severus, that is the real beauty of the language. And the beautiful thing that I think you do for us with Listen Up Irish is you give us access to that in a way that is, it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, we're definitely, as well, I have to say, like, I'm so against this thing of like, you have to say it this way, you have to say it this way. I'm like there's a whole police force out there policing people's pronunciation, and it really can be very off-putting for somebody who's learning. All we are doing in explanatory videos and listening to Joe say, this is the way it's pronounced in this particular area, and you might hear this somewhere else, and you might hear this somewhere else. And try yourself. Nobody's saying what you're saying is wrong. You have to have a conversation at the end of the day is the main goal. But in terms of if you do want to get to the point where you can listen to the likes of Reggie and Gaeilge, you do need to start developing a little bit of an ear for dialect, differences in dialect, and that kind of Irish, I think. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, it's like a website that I tell people to go on all the time is commons.ie. And now maybe it's not best for, learners just starting out, but if you want to get like an idea of the variation in pronunciations across Ireland, go on to commons.ie and you can type in any word. You can type in whatever word you want, whatever it is, I don't know, madra. And you'll get 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9 variations on the word madra, starting down in Cork all the way up to Donegal. And I think that just shows like we can't be like there's only one right way of saying something. We need to be open to the variations. And I say to people as well, I've gone into classes and people are like, I'm only used to like a Donegal Irish. I'm not going to be able to understand you. And I was like, it's only going to benefit you if you've been already exposed to Donegal Irish, and now you're going to be exposed to Connemara Irish. And with the Caidan, I mean, the Caidan is a bit, lots of people have lots of things to say about the Caidan. But even like in the Gaeltacht and Connemara, and I see it like amongst younger people that the Caidan has kind of been pushed on people in the Gaeltacht. And like, it, in my opinion, it kind of ruins the flavour. Like there's so much flavour and variety and like all these different dialects. And I think they should be kind of, I don't even want to say preserved, but encouraged. Like we should embrace our own differences in that sense. And, be exposed to each other. It's only a good thing.
Oh, completely. I mean, I don't know. What is it? Somebody said, that like a language is just a dialect with a navy, because I suppose when you establish a country, you've got to set up a Caidan. They did it in France, and they said, look, sorry, you whatever you speak in Breton or in Provence, you have to speak the French standard, and that's we write the laws in, that's what we issue the judgments in, and a country has to have a standard, right? So Ireland did it. And then they created this kind of stuff, but it's a language that is only used in, well, if it isn't used in Dáil Éireann much, but to write, statutes and so on, and to be the official standard language. But it's an artificial language. It doesn't really exist outside of bureaucracy.
Yeah, you're right. It's only used for legislation, really. The way you want to hear the good language is going to a pub out the country and you'll hear.
Completely. Or listen up Irish, I would suggest. But to come back and to aid our listeners maybe who aren't familiar with it or haven't had the pleasure of being participated in it before. Who is it for? I mean, what level of proficiency do I have to have now to be able to start on one of your programs?
Well, I guess both our first challenge was very much for the intermediate to upper intermediate learner. And then after that, we wanted to make something a little easier. So for the kind of lower intermediate level, which would be, even people with kind of rusty school Irish or upper beginner even. So that was our second challenge. That was a shorter book, just a 3-week challenge this time, and based on Machtir Dernach by Patricia Ford, which is a really gorgeous book. And again, just a great story, but also very much a historical context that we could also use. And we added that in. We had some input from Garrod O'Pulhy. He's a former professor of history in the University in Galway. So that one is set in Cromwellian times in Ireland as well. So like we're trying to build this kind of awareness around the language. Even that all feeds into what happened to the language and having some knowledge of that period of Irish history as well. But again, just fundamentally a good story first and foremost. And we're actually working on the second one at the moment, which will be around the same level as on Machtir Dernach. That will come out in March. And then this summer challenge, which is our big one, that this year will be slightly different format to last year's, but I will say we have something good planned for this summer as well. That's all I'll say.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm excited already.
Yeah.
But so I suppose on Mock Look, the last wolf. So there's obviously a little bit of a natural kind of interaction with the natural environment there as well, and but that would be suitable for maybe, let's say, beginner or intermediate, lower intermediate.
Beginner, lower intermediate, even upper intermediates are doing it as well. And everybody can get something kind of slightly different out of it. I think.
Yeah.
Of course, once somebody signed up for one of our challenges, they have it long term. So many, they do.
And this is the thing that I because I suppose for somebody who's not familiar, I mean, we're not going to go through each kind of module kind of, bit by bit here, but I mean, it's phenomenal. One of the things you get, for instance, is you'll get the PDF with the original text as Gaeilge on the left hand side of the page, and then a translation as Béarla on the right hand side of the page. And what I found beautiful in relation to that is I could expand out the PDF so I couldn't see the English language side of the page, and I'd listen to Joe reading it, and I'd go through it without kind of looking at the English piece, and then I'd go, okay, I didn't understand that, what was it? And you could just literally, and even if it was the way the sentence structure would work, you could then see how you had presume you, Patricia, maybe have done the translations of it, how that worked in terms of sentence structure.
Yeah.
But your translation was quite deliberately kind of buckle, wasn't it? I mean, you didn't.
Yeah, very, very deliberately. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Could you explain what you were thinking there?
Yeah, so for example, if you got the sentence like something agus bungvekmenish the una an uer agus a gihe a brickbust emerald.
Yeah.
So Una was very cold and her eating her breakfast would be the translation. Of course, you wouldn't write that. You'd say something like Una was very cold as she ate her breakfast.
While she was eating or whatever. Yeah.
Just kind of pointing out that, and then in the explanatory.
August is when as well as and, isn't that it? Like, I mean,
stuff like that. So, and him doing this. So actually, when you do a word for word translation, very often you end up with a very nice Hiberno English flavor on the text, which is nice, which Irish readers find easy, which helps Irish people who live in Ireland. We're used to the way we speak English in Ireland, but I know for some of our American and people living outside of Ireland, they find it a little odd to read those.
I know, and he goes like, and I'm after break in it now, sure. But that's the idiom,
Yeah, exactly.
But I think as an Irish person learning, I found that phenomenally beneficial because you had deliberately kind of, if you like, maintained the Irish language idiom into the English language, which makes sense for us here in Ireland. Yeah. And you could then go back and say, that's strange.
That's why we say it that way in English.
Yeah. No, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Tell me, Patricia, sorry, and Joe, obviously, have you noticed from your experience of running the challenges now, have you gotten any feedback from people in terms of how people have engaged with it, what has worked for people or what hasn't worked for people, or things like that?
Yeah, I can answer that. I think we've been maybe pleasantly surprised by the positive feedback we've gotten. I think people who have taken the course seem to enjoy it. We've only really, I'm trying to think of any kind of maybe constructive criticism or negative feedback, but I think we've only received positive now. I'm only messing. We must have gotten something that was constructive. Patricia, can you think of anything?
I can't actually think of anything now. Maybe they're just too polite.
Right. If there was any constructive, we didn't really get anything negative, but the majority, people were very kind in their feedback, very positive. People seem to be enjoying this kind of methodology, or I suppose if you want to call it that. I think they enjoy being, entertained as they're learning something.
Yeah. We do, and the live sessions I think help with that as well, because in every challenge there's a couple of live sessions, so people get to meet each other, to chat to other people who are doing it. That kind of helps as well, just that feeling of we're all doing this together, kind of.
It's like being in this really kind of sort of, kind of a book club on steroids or something like that. It's you've got the book club, kind of aspect, but also all of the supports that exist around that.
Yeah, book club on steroids. I like it.
So tell me, what about yourselves in terms of, is there anything you've kind of learned from the process in terms of from your experience of it that you've said, oh, that kind of worked, didn't work, would do it differently the next time, or said, would maybe there's an opportunity to do something else here as well, or any things like that have happened to you in the course of it?
I think our first challenge, Baudelaire, we weren't ready for it, to be totally honest with you. We weren't ready for the amount of work that is required. We were kind of just going into it saying, yeah, we'll do this course, we'll do Baudelaire, it's be grand. And then we didn't get enough work done before the course. So we were working, as the course was going on, we were working on it, trying to get the material recorded, uploaded, etc. So that summer was pretty hectic.
So you were building it as you were flying it.
That's it. But
I felt like I'd written the book by the end.
That's how all the best startups start. I mean, that's it. It's what do they call it? Minimum viable product, and away you go. Yeah. So would you think then that the better way to do it would have been that you would have the kind of, if you like, the background work done on creating the material before you actually launched the challenge?
I think the first one was always going to be like entering kind of unknown waters, uncharted waters for us. We weren't really sure how this would work. How many people were actually going to be interested in it. So the first one was always going to be a bit of a shot in the dark, and Baudelaire was a big one to start with. Like it's a novel really. Like it's a big novel for. So it was a lot of work. So I think I don't know. It like maybe it was the best way to do it. That kind of the way we did it.
Yeah, honestly, it was a baptism of fire, you could say. But it was so worth it in the end, because honestly, the feedback we got on it was just so positive, and it's such a good book. I'm really glad we picked that book.
We're still early days with all of these courses, we're trying to get to the stage where we have kind of something to offer to every type of learner. So we're still, we only have, what do we have, 2 courses under our belts. We're working on the 3rd at the minute in the summer. But we want to it'd be great to have like a library of courses available to people who want to do them. And that's kind of where we're headed at the minute.
Well, that's an amazing thing to hear, because one of the questions that I had in mind, the question of concern, was to say, I can imagine the amount of work that must be involved and required to do it. And I was then saying to myself, well, is it worth it? Because sometimes you can say, well, listen, it's all great and the honor and glory and great feedback and so on, but does this make sense? Do I want to do it again? I mean, Patricia, from listening to you, I think I'm very, very much heartened by the fact that I think you guys are very kind of passionate about the future of it. But do you see the potential that has? Is this sustainable as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I definitely think it is sustainable. You learn from everyone you do. Like, you learn so much from doing both. Like, would I want to do another boat there this summer? Like, we have another plan for this summer, but let me tell you, we have figured out a way to make it sustainable for us in terms of the workload. But no, I'm not because I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change a thing, actually. I think I'm very glad with how it's all been panning out so far. I'm just glad as well. The choices of book, Joe picked the first one, I picked the second one. They're both good choices, and our third one.
And it's a testament, to the contemporary Irish language authors that we have working in Ireland today. That as I say, I think it is a shameful lack of recognition and exposure for their work as artists. I mean, I was struck by the fact that we had a list in the Irish Times, in early 2025 on the best 100 books, the best 100 Irish books of the 21st century, and none of them featured. No Irish language book featured on the list, and there are reasons for that, obviously, but the fact that you're kind of, if you like, shining a light on these contemporary writers, and the fact that the quality of what they're producing is really. So talk to me a little bit about it. We've spoken about the listener's experience and the listener feedback that you've had. What has the feedback you've had from the authors been like? What's their experience been of the whole process?
I think they've both been very positive. At the end of both Baudelaire and Mathieu Derenach, the first time we did it, we got the authors in to do Q&A with the participants. And like, so that was great. So, people had gone through the book, and then they got to ask the authors any questions they wanted, what inspired the book, and lots of interesting questions came up. So authors, well, we've worked 2 so far. This summer we won't be able to have such direct contact with the author. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, they have been.
Well, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, honest to God, like they've been so good to us. Like,
yeah,
with answering questions that we have, and like being willing to do the Q&A.
Yeah.
And even the publishers, like
and the publishers as well.
Been mighty. Like we had Fátharta, and then we had
Laura Brack.
Laura Brack. Like both of them just really, really fantastic people to be working with, and like so kind and to offer their, guidance and answer any questions we had. And like at the end of the day, you have to think that these are authors that want people to read their books. Like, they want people to be reading their books. So that the more people that are going out there buying their books, the better for them. And I think it's a symbiotic relationship that's working pretty well.
Wonderful. And are you seeing, and on that, because I think that is so critically important that people are, people write these, okay, they write them because they're passionate about the art, but they want people to consume and be to be able to enjoy the art. Are you seeing the demand for that amongst your audience, Patricia? I know you've been working for a long time now, developing a list in All About Irish and so on.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the demand out there?
Yeah, well, I like, as somebody who's been teaching adults for many years, like I have always been encouraging people to read, and not just come to your class, but reading little chapters, doing excerpts from books in classes and so on. And for sure, once somebody realizes there are books out there in Irish that I can read, maybe because they did on Mathieu Derenach, maybe then they'll go and pick up another book themselves in an Irish book. So it's just even if it just somebody does one challenge with us, but it gets them started. I think people sometimes are not aware of, like, if you looked at the Fátharta website, for example, the range of books they have for children there, or Laura Brack has Roald Dahl in Irish, there's so many great books in Irish out there, by original books and also translations. But so I just think for learning a language, like reading and listening, they're fundamental way, and there's such a way to get input in a language like that.
Yeah, and there's another thing to add on to that as well. Like, I think, Patricia, you mentioned it, like everyone who buys the course, they get to keep, nothing goes away after once the course is ended. You keep all the materials and stuff. And like, I remember, when I was a young lad trying to read Martin O'Kine, and geez, I couldn't, I couldn't read any of it. And so over time, I kept going back to it. And, even now I wouldn't, I'd still have to look up words. But over time, reading stories and looking them up and doing that slog, it's just, you can't really read the book properly. You're going to the dictionary every couple of words. But after a while of doing that, now I can read the stories and like, oh yeah, I remember what that word means. I remember what this word means. And I think that's something that these people who've bought these courses will have. Maybe if you do the course first time around and you're like, Jesus, there was a lot there now I didn't get. Well, then you can go back to the start of the book again and start over. And like, oh yeah, I looked up that word before. Now I have that word. And yeah, like for me, when I started being able to actually read Martin O'Kine instead of, looking up at the folklore, such a great moment for me. I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Like,
because I think Craine Aquila must be up there with Ulysses in terms of the amount of books that sit on shelves that nobody's ever read. Yeah. Folks, as we approach the end of this session, and I listen, I'm sorry, I know that I have you here, I could hug you and kind of keep you talking forever, but unfortunately we have to try and keep this in a framework that works for our listeners. What I'd like to do, first of all, I'm just extremely pleased and delighted to hear that the future of Listen Up Irish is strong. And for anybody who hasn't had pleasure of participating in it previously, I really do cannot encourage or recommend it to you enough. And I myself am looking forward very much to watching that coming forward for us. And it's great to hear that it is sustainable and that it is and that you can see a future in it. But I suppose separately from just the business case, if you like, for doing these things, what motivates you into it? What is your Irish language why, in terms of you put all of this work into the language and the literature and helping people to learn? Why do you do that? Both of you, would you mind giving me just your thoughts on that? Patricia, first of all.
Okay, I'll go first. I think, Flor, when I spoke to you a couple of years ago on the podcast, I said I originally got into Irish because I was teaching Irish because I was so interested in languages. And that is very true. So language learning in general is a kind of passion of mine. However, there's something more with learning Irish, that if you live in Ireland or even you're outside of Ireland, this whole extra culture, and to think that this culture has been hidden from people, to think that it's endangered as well, it would make you sad to think that it could be lost. So I think just for whatever way I can help people access the language, even place things, and I think probably I'm kind of a political type of person as well, in terms of what we see going on in the world and cultures being destroyed and lost and people and the effects of colonization and all of that. So bringing Irish back, Irish is here and it's always been here for so many people that living in the Gaeltacht areas, but trying to increase the use of Irish, to increase the idea that we could imagine if we could be bilingual society. I just think it'd be so amazing. There's such a richness in it like the more people that get back into Irish, like yourself, the way you've done it, and the more people get back into Irish, speaking it, using it, making it normal, like that you might have a conversation with somebody in Irish and someone else in English, and you're dropping words of Irish here and there, and we can be bilingual, we can use them all. It's not either or. And that it's just a very welcoming place for everybody as well, the Irish language. I don't know, there is something about Irish. When I hear like Irish, you can feel it in your body almost, like, and I think the more you learn about Irish history as well, the more relevant the language becomes. So in terms of current day political situation as well, I think it's important. And that we're proud of it as a people, that we're proud of our heritage is very important.
Joe,
at the moment, yeah.
Joe, what is your language why? What motivates you to teach it the way you do?
It's a difficult question to answer, or even think of, an answer that wouldn't sound kind of totally silly, or it's kind of like I don't know. My relation to the language is like, I feel it feels very much a part of me and who I am, and where I came from. Growing up in the Gaeltacht, it just seemed like this. You had two worlds, kind of. You had the English speaking world. You'd go into Galway City, and you go into Duns, and everybody there would be speaking English. And then back, especially when I was younger, when I think about it, back in the Gaeltacht, then you had all these people, and you had especially older people, and they just seemed like two totally separate worlds. If I'm being totally honest, but these old people that just had a different pace of life, had a different attitude towards life. And to me, that has always been some kind of like, it's been a draw to me, like that whatever, maybe it's an image that I've fabricated in my head, but it's been a draw for me, and it kind of developed my interest in the Irish language. And all around me growing up, it kind of imbued everything, all aspects of my life. Like there was, and I'm trying to gather them now at the minute, the fields around where I was brought up. I'm trying to gather the names of them, and even looking up old words. Or my father might say a word, and I'd be like, what's that word mean? And I get so much, it gives me so much joy, and even sense of belonging and fulfillment. Kind of hard to really put into words what it does for me, but it kind of makes me giddy. Like I like doing it. And so maybe with the teaching, I'm trying to maybe pass some of that giddiness on, if that makes any sense.
That makes So much sense. And that is just so cool because, I mean, you know, and thank you for what you were doing, because you were enabling those of us who don't have that connection. You are providing us with the ability to have a glimpse of that. We'll never have, I think, the depth, obviously, that you have had in it, but to give us that ability to access it is phenomenal, both of you. It is an extraordinary thing, and we're extraordinarily grateful to you for doing it. It is amazing work that you were doing. A Patricia agus a Joe a Gaeilge gur raibh míle maith agaibh bert bunas an súb as an scéal a rainn sibh linn berbua agus bannacht. A Gaeilge. Thanks for listening. Gur raibh míle maith agat as a bheith éisteacht. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would really appreciate your feedback and would be eternally grateful if you would follow, rate and review the show. Please also be sure to sign up at thelanguagequestion.com/resources to get your free valuable learning resources and to stay up to date with upcoming episodes, guests and to receive exclusive content. Slán Tamil.